My name is Naomi. I was 32 years old and a caterer by profession. I had always thought that my world was perfect until it began to fall apart. I lived in a small but warm apartment above my catering shop in the heart of Oak Lane. The smell of baked bread, fried plantain, and simmering stew always filled the air around me. People in the neighborhood called me Mama Comfort because I loved feeding others, even when I barely had enough for myself. My husband, Goody, worked for a big company downtown. He was charming, soft-spoken, and always dressed neatly in ironed shirts and shiny shoes. He said his job demanded long hours, but I didn't complain. I believed love was patient. Every Friday I cooked his favorite meal, pepper soup and rice, and sent it to his office. He would call later that night, thanking me with a sleepy voice and telling me he loved me. Those moments made all my tiredness fade away. Life felt simple, almost perfect. I woke up early every morning, kneading dough while the world was still quiet. Children from nearby homes came by before school to buy meat pies and buns. I'd smile as I handed them warm paper bags, my heart full from their laughter. Evenings were my favorite. I'd wait by the window, listening for Goddy's steps in the hallway. Sometimes he came home late, smelling faintly of cologne and exhaustion. "Work was rough," he'd say, rubbing his neck. I'd serve him hot food, and he'd eat silently while scrolling through his phone. I often wanted to ask what he was working on, but something in his tone always stopped me. I trusted him. After all, what was love without trust? One night, while folding laundry, I found a tiny golden button in his trouser pocket. It wasn't from any of his shirts. I laughed to myself, thinking it must have come off a coworker's outfit. I set it aside on the dresser, unaware that this little piece of metal would later haunt me. The next day, while packing lunch for him, I hummed softly. Maybe I'll make him fried rice tonight, I thought. He had been tired lately. When he left, he kissed my forehead and whispered, "Don't wait up, Naomi. We have late meetings tonight." His voice was calm, his smile the same as always. After he left, I looked out the window and watched him disappear into the busy street. Something in my chest felt heavy, though I couldn't explain why. I brushed it off and went back to my kitchen, unaware that love was already preparing to test me in ways I never imagined. That Friday, rain clouds gathered early. The wind carried the smell of wet soil, and thunder rolled faintly in the distance. I had promised to send Goddy's dinner as usual, but this time I finished cooking much earlier. My pepper soup bubbled gently on the stove, filling the room with warmth. I packed it neatly with rice, placing a small note inside that read, "You're working hard and I'm proud of you. Love, Naomi." Normally, I'd send it through Dan, the young man who helped me deliver food around town. But something told me to do it earlier that night. Maybe it was the storm. Maybe it was the quiet voice in my heart. I handed Dan the package and said, "Take this quickly to Goldust Holdings, room 6B. Tell him it's from his wife." He nodded and ran into the rain, holding the bag close. I smiled and went back to cleaning, feeling oddly content. An hour passed. Then my phone rang. "Hello," answered. "Ma." Dan's voice shook. "Are you sure this food is for Mr. Crawford?" "Yes, of course," I said, confused. "Why?" He hesitated. Because a woman just said she's his wife." My heart dropped. "What did you say?" She said, "I'm his wife. Thank you for bringing dinner." Then she closed the door. For a long moment I couldn't breathe. My knees weakened and the room spun. "Dan, describe her," I whispered. "She's fair, maybe late 20s, wearing a ring." The call ended and I stood still, my hands trembling. The rain outside grew louder, matching the storm now raging inside me. My mind searched for explanations. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe he shared an office with someone. Maybe. I sank onto the chair, staring at the clock ticking on the wall. Each tick sounded like a heartbeat. I tried calling Goddy, but he didn't answer. Again and again it went to voicemail. When he finally called back hours later, his tone was calm, almost tired. Naomi, why are you calling so much? I sent food to your office, I said softly. Someone else said she was your wife. There was a pause. That must be a misunderstanding, he said. You know how people joke at work. But his voice lacked its usual warmth. He hung up quickly, saying he'd explain later. That night he didn't come home. Barely slept. My eyes stayed fixed on the window, watching rain drip down like tears. The next morning I went to his office myself. My stomach felt tight with worry. The receptionist at Goldust Holdings looked up politely when I entered. Good morning, I said, forcing a smile. I'm here to see my husband, Gotti Crawford. She frowned. I'm sorry, ma'am. Mr. Crawford hasn't worked here for weeks. The world seemed to tilt. What do you mean? She glanced at the computer screen. He resigned a month ago. I walked out, my feet heavy. Outside, the city buzzed with normal life, but mine had gone silent. I stood on the pavement, rain dampening my hair. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. When I returned home, neighbors greeted me warmly. Unaware my heart was breaking. I forced a smile and entered the kitchen. The golden button still sat on the dresser, gleaming faintly in the afternoon light. Suddenly, it didn't look harmless anymore. Days passed. Gotti sent short texts like, busy today, or don't worry about me. Each one felt colder than the last. At night, I sat by the stove, staring at the flame. My friends told me to leave him, but something in me refused. I needed to know the truth before I walked away. Then one afternoon, while I was serving a customer at my stall, an older woman appeared. Her face was kind but sharp, her eyes calm and deep. You're Naomi, yes? She asked. Yes, Ma, I said. She smiled faintly and handed me extra money. Your food carries warmth, she said softly. Don't lose that. Even when the world tests it. Her words struck something in me. I didn't know her name yet, but that was the first time I met Madame Ilias, and I had no idea how much she would soon change my life. The day after Madame Eloise first came, I couldn't stop thinking about her. Her voice had carried a strange calm that lingered long after she left. I didn't even know why it mattered so much. Maybe because everything else in my life felt like it was falling apart. My husband hadn't come home in 3 days. I kept cooking his meals out of habit, leaving one plate covered on the table each night, only to throw it away in the morning. I told the neighbors he was traveling for work, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. Rumors travel fast in Oak Lane. On the 4th morning, I went to the market to restock vegetables. I walked past the fruit stalls, the smell of ripe mango and wet earth filling the air. A woman selling tomatoes whispered to another, glancing in my direction. I pretended not to notice, my heart tightening. When I returned to my stall, Madame Eloise was there again. She sat quietly, her umbrella resting beside her chair, watching the rain drip from the roof. You're late today, she said gently. I had to buy fresh peppers, I replied. She nodded and smiled. Good food takes patience. Then she looked straight at me. You look tired, my dear. I hesitated before answering. My husband has been away longer than usual. Her gaze softened. Distance tests love, but truth always finds its way home. Those words pierced deeper than she could have known. Before I could ask what she meant, she handed me a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. A customer left this for you, she said, and walked away. I unwrapped it later that evening. Inside was a handkerchief embroidered with the initials GC, Gotti's, and a short note. When lies start to rot, the scent always returns home. My hands trembled. Who could have sent it? That night, I sat by the window again, clutching the handkerchief. The city outside flickered with lights, but all I saw was darkness. The next morning I went searching for answers. If Gotti hadn't worked at Goldust Holdings for weeks, where had he been going every day with his briefcase and ironed shirts? I decided to follow him. When he finally called that afternoon saying he needed to pick up some old files, I agreed sweetly and told him dinner would be waiting. Then, quietly, I slipped out a few minutes after he left. The streets were crowded with evening noise, motorbikes honking, hawkers shouting, children laughing. I kept my distance, hiding behind the cover of pedestrians. He walked with quick steps toward the other side of town, where older buildings stood close together like secrets. He stopped at a faded blue gate, looked around and entered. My heart raced. The sign above the gate read Bright Sky Logistics. I waited across the street, pretending to check my phone. After 20 minutes, a woman came out, slender, graceful, her hair tied neatly in a bun. She was the same woman Dan had described. She locked the gate, carrying a small bag. And then, to my shock, Gotti followed her out. He touched her arm gently before she smiled and walked away. I wanted to scream his name but couldn't. My legs felt glued to the ground. He glanced around once before heading in the opposite direction. When I finally returned home, the food on the table had gone cold. My chest burned but tears wouldn't come. I was past crying. That night, I pulled out the golden button again and placed it beside the handkerchief. Two pieces of a puzzle I didn't yet understand. Suddenly my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. Some truths need quiet hearts to see clearly. Meet me tomorrow at noon. Klein Park. Come alone. There was no name but I recognized the tone. It sounded like Madame Eloise. The next day the park was nearly empty. The air smelled of rain-soaked grass, and the trees dripped slowly from last night's storm. I sat on a bench near the fountain, clutching my handbag tightly. Madame Eloise appeared, walking with measured grace. She wore a simple cream dress and a hat that shaded her face. "You came," she said, sitting beside me. "I had to," I replied. "You sent the message, didn't you?" She smiled faintly. "I did. And I sent the handkerchief too." My heart pounded. "Why? How did you even know my husband?" She looked at the fountain for a long moment before speaking. "Because I once knew a man like him. Charming. Secretive. But you, my dear, you remind me of the wife he betrayed." I didn't know what to say. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small folder. "I can't tell you everything yet," she said. "But Gotti's lies go deeper than you think. He isn't just hiding another woman. He's hiding a mistake that could destroy more lives than his own." Felt dizzy. "What kind of mistake?" "Something at his former company," she whispered. "And someone powerful is watching how you handle it." Her words sent chills down my spine. "Watching me?" She nodded slowly. "Your patience, your kindness. It's not unnoticed. Keep your heart steady. When the time comes, truth will find you." Before I could ask more, she stood. "And Naomi, don't confront him yet. The test isn't over." She walked away, leaving me surrounded by the gentle splash of the fountain and 1,000 unspoken questions. That evening I returned home in silence. I sat by the window, watching the last light fade from the sky. Madame Eloise's words echoed in my head. The test isn't over. I tried to act normal. I cooked dinner, even though Gotti hadn't been home all week. Around 8, I heard footsteps in the hallway. My heart leaped. The door opened, and there he was, tired, distant, pretending nothing was wrong. "You're home," I said quietly. "Yeah. Busy week," he replied, dropping his bag. I studied his face. There were faint shadows under his eyes, but something else too, a flicker of fear. I served his meal and sat opposite him. "You left your job weeks ago," I said softly. "Why didn't you tell me?" His fork froze midair. "Who told you that?" "I went there myself." He sighed heavily, setting the fork down. "It's complicated, Naomi. I didn't want to worry you." "Try me," I whispered. He rubbed his forehead. "There was an issue at the company. Some missing funds. They blamed me, but it wasn't my fault. I've been working with someone privately to fix it." My chest tightened. "Someone? Who?" He hesitated. "A woman who knows people in management. She said she could help clear my name." I looked at him, seeing now how fear had eaten into his charm. "Is that the same woman who called herself your wife?" He stared at me, eyes wide. "You don't understand. Then make me understand. But instead of explaining, he stood abruptly. I can't talk about this now, he muttered, grabbing his jacket. When the door slammed behind him, I sat in the quiet, trembling. Then I noticed his briefcase still on the table. Inside, beneath papers and receipts, was a small sealed envelope addressed to E.L. My breath caught. Could it stand for Eloise? The envelope with the initials E.L. sat on the table like a secret, whispering my name. My first thought was Eloise. But why would Gotti have a letter for her? I hesitated, torn between respect for privacy and the need to breathe again. Finally, I slid it open with trembling fingers. Inside was a typed note and a business card. The note read, "The documents will be ready by Friday. Meet at the old warehouse by the harbor. No one else must know." The card bore Madame Eloise's company crest, Eloise Foods International, a name I had seen printed on food trucks around town. I dropped the papers, my pulse racing. The older woman who spoke to me with kindness at my stall was the head of a large business empire. Why would my husband be meeting her at a warehouse? Was she part of the problem, or the solution? That night I barely slept. I replayed every word she'd said. Someone powerful is watching how you handle it. Had she been testing me all along? By morning I'd made my choice. I would go to the harbor on Friday and find out the truth for myself. The next 2 days crawled by. I kept up appearances at my stall, smiling through gossip and pretending not to notice the sideways glances. Each time Madame Eloise came by for food, I served her quietly, trying not to let my hands shake. On Thursday evening, she lingered after everyone left. "You look worried, Naomi," she said softly. "I've learned things I don't understand," I replied. She studied me for a long moment. Understanding doesn't come before courage. It follows after. Before leaving, she pressed something into my palm, a tiny silver key tied with a red thread. "For when the moment feels right," she said, then walked away under the dim streetlights. The next day arrived with heavy clouds. I closed my stall early and took a bus to the harbor. The air smelled of salt and rust. Old containers lined the pier, their sides streaked with rain and age. My heart thudded with every step. At the end of the pier stood the warehouse, large, quiet, and half-lit. I slipped inside through a side door. Boxes filled the space, stacked to the ceiling. Voices echoed from the far corner. I crept closer and peered around a crate. Gotti stood there, facing Madame Eloise. "You said this would clear everything," he whispered. "It will," she replied calmly. "But only if you tell her the truth." Her eyes turned slightly, and for a second I thought she saw me. My breath caught, but she looked away again. I backed out quietly, heart pounding. Outside, the wind picked up, tossing rain against my face. I didn't know what game they were playing, but I was now part of it. The next morning I felt both stronger and more afraid. I knew 2 things now. Gotti was entangled with Madame Eloise in something secret, and she wanted me to find out, but on her terms. I opened my stall early, trying to calm myself with routine. Customers came and went, their laughter filling the air, but I felt like a ghost among them. Around noon, a messenger arrived with a sealed envelope. "For Mrs. Crawford," he said, handing it to me. Inside was a single sheet. "You looked brave last night. Meet me tomorrow. 10 a.m. Eloise Foods headquarters." The official letterhead shimmered faintly in the sunlight. My hand shook. She had known I was at the warehouse. That evening, Gotti came home unexpectedly. He looked exhausted, his tie loosened, eyes darting around the room as if afraid of being watched. "Where were you last night?" I asked. "Work," he said quickly. "Still the same job you resigned from." He froze, then forced a smile. "I'm sorting things out. Please, Naomi, don't make this harder. I'm not the one hiding letters." His head snapped up. "What letter?" "The one for E.L." For a heartbeat, silence filled the room like thick smoke. Then he said quietly, "You opened it." "I did," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "You lied to me for weeks, Gotti. I deserve to know why. He sank into a chair, rubbing his temples. It's not what you think. Madame Eloise is trying to help me. There was corruption at the company. Money stolen by top managers. I signed off on something I didn't understand, and now they're blaming me. She offered to help me prove my innocence. I stared at him. Then why all the secrecy? Because the people involved are dangerous. She said keeping you away would protect you. My anger softened just a little, replaced by confusion. So the other woman. He swallowed hard. Part of the cover. She was hired to pretend to mislead anyone watching. It sounded unbelievable, yet his fear looked real. Still too many pieces didn't fit. Then why didn't you tell me everything? He reached for my hand. Because you're the only good thing I have left. I didn't want this darkness to touch you. His fingers were cold. I wanted to believe him, but doubt still gnawed at me. That night when he fell asleep, I sat beside the window, staring out at the city lights. Tomorrow I would meet Madame Eloise again, this time at her world, not mine. Maybe then I'd finally see the whole picture. The Eloise Foods building rose like a monument of glass and quiet power. Every window gleamed under the morning sun, reflecting the city's pulse. I stood at the entrance clutching the invitation letter, trying not to look out of place among the suits and polished shoes that streamed in. A young receptionist smiled when she saw the envelope. Mrs. Crawford. Madame Eloise is expecting you. Please this way. The elevator ride felt endless. Each floor we passed smelled of roasted coffee and ambition. When the doors opened on the top floor, I was met by silence. Thick carpets, pale gold walls, the kind of space where even footsteps seemed to whisper. Madame Eloise was standing by the window, her silver-streaked hair catching the light. She turned, smiling that calm, knowing smile. Naomi, she said. You came. I almost didn't, I admitted. I don't even know why I'm here. Because truth always calls the ones ready to bear it. She motioned to a chair. Sit. I did. The table between us was empty except for a folder marked Project Dawn. She slid it toward me. Your husband was drawn into a scheme designed to launder funds through community food suppliers. He didn't create it, but he signed papers that made him responsible. My stomach twisted. He said you were helping him prove his innocence. That's partly true, she replied. But you must understand, the men he worked for will not allow the truth to surface easily. They are powerful, ruthless. I looked down at the folder. Inside were photos, gaudy shaking hands with unfamiliar faces, documents stamped with foreign seals, wire transfer records. Why are you showing me this? I whispered. Because you are stronger than he is, she said softly. And because you're already in it, whether you realize it or not. I stared at her, shaken. What do you mean? She stood, walking toward a wall of framed pictures. Community kitchens, children being fed, farmers smiling. Do you know who funds these outreach programs? You do. Every day at your stall you feed people with food supplied by us. We've been watching how you run it, how you treat everyone equally. That's why I approached you first. I swallowed. You've been watching me. Yes, she said simply. You were our test of integrity. And you passed. I didn't know whether to feel honored or violated. You could have just told me. You wouldn't have believed it then. You were still living in your husband's shadow. The words cut deep, though she said them without cruelty. What do you want from me now? She met my gaze. A choice. If you help us expose the corruption, you'll save many. But it will destroy Gaudi's reputation before it clears him. If you stay silent, they will bury him anyway, and you with him. Felt dizzy. That's no choice at all. It is the only kind of choice that matters, she said quietly. One that defines who you become. When I left her office, the city outside looked sharper, colder. By the time I reached the ground floor, I had decided only one thing. I would not let other people write my story anymore. That night, the rain returned. Steady, cleansing, endless. I sat by the window with the Project Dawn folder open on my lap. Gotti's picture stared back at me, a reminder of the man I married and the stranger he'd become. He came home late again, water dripping from his coat. "You're still awake." "I met Madame Eloise," I said quietly. He froze. "You what?" "She told me everything. About the money. About the company. About you." He closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. "I was going to tell you." "When?" "After they dragged our names through the mud." He moved closer, kneeling before me. "Naomi, I was afraid. I thought I could fix it before you found out. I thought I could protect you." "Protect me?" I said bitterly. "You've been protecting a lie." He bowed his head. "I didn't ask for her help, but once she offered, I couldn't refuse. She knows things. Dangerous things." "I know," I murmured. "She showed me." His eyes widened. "What else did she say?" "That I have a choice," I replied. "To expose everything or stay silent." For a moment, only the rain spoke between us. Then he whispered, "If you do this, they'll come for us both. If I don't, they'll still come." He stood pacing. "You think she's helping? She's protecting her empire. If we become inconvenient, she'll sacrifice us too." Something in his tone frightened me. Not anger but despair. "Then what do we do, Gotti?" He turned to the window, the streetlight carving shadows across his face. "We find proof. Real proof. Not her curated version." He looked at me again, and for the first time in months I saw the man I once knew. The one who dreamed of building something honest. "Will you help me?" he asked. I nodded slowly. "Yes. But no more lies." We spent the next hour going through the folder together, marking every document that looked suspicious. One file caught my eye. Shipment #47B. Community outreach. Naomi Crawford. It listed my stall as a distribution point tied to the same accounts under investigation. My breath caught. They used my name. Gotti's face turned pale. "That means they've been watching you too." Lightning flashed, illuminating the room. In that instant I understood. This wasn't just about corruption, it was about control. Every step I'd taken had been part of someone's map. I closed the folder. "Then we start tomorrow," I said. "Before they erase us completely." He nodded. Outside, thunder rolled across the city like an omen. Morning came with a pale, uneasy light. I didn't sleep. Neither did Gotti. We stayed at the kitchen table surrounded by papers, phones, and coffee gone cold. Every few minutes, one of us would find a new detail that didn't fit. An invoice number off by one digit, a signature copied across two different documents. It was like following footprints in mud. You could see them, but they led in circles. By noon I looked up at him and said, "We can't keep doing this here. If they're watching us, they'll notice." He rubbed his temples. "You're right. I know someone who can help. An old coworker now in logistics. He used to handle shipment records." "What's his name?" "Felix." I hesitated. "Can we trust him?" He gave a faint smile. "We'll have to." That afternoon we met Felix in a small cafe near the old railway yard. He was a tall, quiet man with glasses and oil-stained fingers, probably from his other job repairing delivery vans. "You didn't get this from me," he muttered, sliding a flash drive across the table. "But if what you're saying is true, you're both in deeper than you think." "What's on it?" I asked. "Shipment logs, internal memos, GPS data. It'll show you who's been moving the goods, and who's been signing for them." Gotti clasped his shoulder. "Thank you." Felix shook his head. "Don't thank me. Just get out before it's too late. Madame Eloise doesn't play small games." When he left, I noticed the tremor in Gotti's hand as he pocketed the flash drive. "He's right," I whispered. "If we're wrong about her." "We're not," he said. "And if we are, we'll face it together." That night, I backed up the files on my laptop and stared at the rows of numbers until my eyes burned. But one name kept appearing again and again in the data. Amari Trade Holdings. the company that supposedly donated to Eloy's Foods outreach programs. Googled it, nothing. No website, no registration. Just a ghost name moving millions. When I looked up, Gotti was already asleep on the couch. I watched him for a while, the lines of worry softening on his face. For the first time in weeks I felt something fragile stir in me, hope maybe. Or the memory of it. The next morning I decided to visit Madame Eloise again, pretending I knew nothing. I needed to see how she'd react when I mentioned Amari Holdings. Her office smelled faintly of jasmine and paper. She was arranging flowers when I arrived. "Naomi," she said with that disarming warmth. "You look tired." "I've been thinking about what you said," I replied. "About choices." She smiled faintly. "And I want to help. But I need to understand more. Who exactly funds your outreach projects?" I came across a name, Amari Trade Holdings. For the first time her expression faltered. Just slightly, but I saw it. "Where did you hear that?" "Oh," I said casually. "A supplier mentioned it. He thought they were part of your donor network." She straightened the vase slowly. "Amari is a partner company, but one we no longer work with." "Why?" Her tone sharpened. "Because they forgot that charity must be clean. Some of their directors were under investigation." "Did Gotti know?" She met my gaze directly. "No. He only knew what he was told. He was foolish, not evil." Something in her voice made my heart ache. She sounded almost protective. Before I left, she handed me a brown envelope. "Take this. You'll need it soon." On the ride home, curiosity gnawed at me. I opened the envelope to find photos of me at my stall at the market, even at church. Dates and times written neatly in the corners. Surveillance. My chest tightened. She had been watching me long before I knew her. But why? That evening I told Gotti everything. He stared at the photos in silence, then whispered, "She's keeping tabs on both of us. Maybe she's making sure we don't ruin her plan." "But what plan?" asked. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. We both knew the truth. Madame Eloise wasn't testing kindness anymore. She was controlling it. We spent the next few days quietly gathering everything we could. Gotti pretended to go to work as usual while I kept the stall running like nothing was wrong. People still smiled, still called me the kind wife. They had no idea I was walking a tightrope between truth and danger. One afternoon, as I was serving a bowl of jollof to a regular customer, a folded note slipped into my hand. "Stop digging. They're watching." Froze. "Who gave you this?" I whispered to the customer. He shrugged. "A man in a suit. Said you'd know." I looked around, heart pounding. Across the street, a black sedan idled near the corner. Tinted windows. No plates. That night, Gotti found a small device taped under the TV stand. A listening bug. He ripped it out, trembling. "They're already here, Naomi. We have to finish this fast," I said. He nodded grimly. "Then we go to the press." "Not yet," I said. "Not until we know who the real hand behind Amari is." We spent the next 2 nights decoding the files from Felix's drive. One document caught my eye. A payment authorization signed not by Madame Eloise, but by her personal assistant, Heike Mallory. Every transfer went through his account before reaching Amari Holdings. Gotti leaned closer. "That's our leak." "Or her shield," I replied. We decided to confront him directly. The next day, Gotti arranged to meet Heike at a coffee shop near the harbor. I waited outside, watching through the glass. At first, the conversation seemed calm. Then I saw Heike's expression harden. He grabbed his bag and stormed off. When Gotti came out, his face was pale. He warned me to stop. Said people disappear when they ask too many questions. Did he say who's behind Amari? He shook his head. Just that it's closer than I think. I didn't understand what that meant. Not yet. But that night, when I opened Madame Eloise's envelope again, I noticed something new on the back of one photo. A faint stamp that read property of Amari Holdings. That was when I realized the impossible. Madame Eloise herself was Amari. The discovery felt like fire in my veins. Barely slept. By morning I'd made up my mind. I was going back to Eloise Foods, this time not as a visitor, but as someone ready to end the lies. Gotti wanted to stop me. Naomi, she's too powerful. I don't care, I said. If she can watch me, I can face her. I wore my plainest dress and walked straight past the receptionist. Madame Eloise is expecting me, I lied. The woman nodded and called upstairs. When I entered the office, Madame Eloise was waiting. Calm, poised, as if she knew why I'd come. You found it, didn't you? She said softly. Yes, I whispered. You are Amari Holdings. She didn't deny it. Instead, she gestured toward a chair. Sit, Naomi. Let me explain before you decide what to do. I stood my ground. Explain why you used my name for your dirty work. I didn't, she said. Not directly. You became part of it when your husband forged your signature. My knees went weak. That's not true. It is, she said and slid a file across the desk. Look. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Gotti's. He had signed shipment clearances under my name, claiming my stall as a distribution front. My heart shattered again. I did this, I murmured. I blamed you, but it was him all along. Eloise's voice softened. He made a mistake, but I never meant to destroy you. I wanted to see how far truth could survive in a world of deceit. You were my answer. Tears blurred my vision. And what happens now? That depends on you, she said. You can expose me and the whole company falls. Or you can let me fix what your husband broke, quietly. I turned to the window, the city glimmering below like broken glass. If I stay silent, I'm no better than him. When I faced her again, I saw pride, not anger, in her eyes. Then speak, Naomi, she said. And let the world decide what to do with us. Chapter 16. I walked out of Madame Eloise's office with a file clutched to my chest. The city lights spinning around me like a carousel I couldn't stop. Gotti's handwriting haunted every page. His signature, his looping GS, the same pen strokes that once signed birthday cards and grocery lists. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to stop loving him. But mostly I wanted to understand why. At home, the smell of last night's stew lingered in the air. Gotti was pacing, waiting for me. When he saw the file, his face drained of color. You went to her, he said flatly. Yes, I whispered. And she showed me this. He sank into a chair. Naomi, please. It wasn't supposed to go that far. Then how far was it supposed to go? My voice trembled. You forged my name, used my business, and let me stand in the dark while people whispered about you. He looked up, guilt etched into every line of his face. I thought I could fix it before you found out. Madame Eloise promised me it was temporary, just a way to dance some missing funds. She said no one would get hurt. She lied, I said. And you believed her. Silence stretched between us, heavy as lead. Finally I spoke again. We can still fix it, Gotti. But not by hiding. We take this to the authorities. He shook his head fiercely. No, you don't understand. If her name goes down, half the company falls. People will lose their jobs, our friends, their families. And what about truth? Shot back. What about the people already hurt by those fake shipments? His shoulders slumped. You sound just like her. No, I said softer now. I sound like me. The woman who believed love could survive honesty. I spent the rest of the night drafting a report. Names, files, everything Felix had given us, to send to an investigative journalist I'd met years ago at a church charity event. Her name was Tara Benifo, a woman known for chasing truth through brick walls. Dawn, I pressed send. The message left my screen like a prayer. Tara called that evening. Her voice was brisk, professional, yet kind. Mrs. Crawford, I got your email. If this is true, it's the biggest corporate scandal this city's seen in years. It's true, I said. But you'll need proof beyond my words. Then meet me, she replied. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., the old printing warehouse on Dark Alley Street. Bring whatever you have. When I hung up, my hands shook. Gotti watched me quietly. You're really going through with it? Yes, I said. I can't live like this anymore. He exhaled. Then I'm coming with you. The next morning was gray and heavy with fog. We left before sunrise, taking separate routes to the meeting point in case anyone followed us. The warehouse stood by the river, its walls peeling, its windows blind with dust. Inside, Tara waited with a small camera crew and 2 laptops. Show me everything, she said. We spread the files on a table. Shipment routes, fake invoices, Eloise's internal memos. When Tara saw the forged signatures, she looked at me sharply. Your husband did this. Yes, I said. But not alone. Madame Eloise orchestrated everything through a shell company called Amari Holdings. She typed rapidly, cross-checking names in her database. Then she froze. You're not going to believe this, she murmured. Amari Holdings is registered overseas, under a subsidiary of Eloise Foods International. So it was true. Madame Eloise hadn't just tested us. She had built the entire illusion. Tara turned to me. Naomi, once I publish this, there's no going back. They'll fight it. I know, I said. But people need to know the truth. Just then a noise echoed outside. A car door slamming. Tara's cameraman peeked through a broken window. 2 black SUVs, he whispered. No plates. My heart jumped. Gotti grabbed my hand. They've found us. Tara acted fast. She stuffed a drive into my palm. This is a copy of everything. If we don't make it out, find someone you trust and release it. We ran toward the rear exit. Footsteps thundered behind us. I heard shouting, men calling out, ordering us to stop. Gotti pushed me through a side door just as glass shattered. A bullet struck the wall beside us. We sprinted through the alley and into the maze of narrow streets. The fog swallowed us, and for a few minutes, only our breathing filled the air. Then a black van roared past the next corner and was gone. We hid behind a market stall until the noise faded. My chest ached. My palms were raw from clutching the flash drive. Gotti looked at me, breathless, eyes wide with fear and remorse. I never meant for it to reach this, he said. I swear, Naomi. I know, I said, surprising myself. But now it has. We stayed there until dawn, watching the first light reflect off the river. The city felt different now. Bigger, colder, but somehow clearer. I had crossed the point of no return. Truth was already moving and there was no taking it back. By the time the sun came up, the story had already begun to move. Tara's network released a short teaser. Major food conglomerate accused of secret fraud network, exclusive at noon. I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching my phone. Gotti paced the room like a man waiting for a sentence. They're going to know it's us, he said. Maybe, I replied. But it's the truth. At noon the city froze. Every radio, every street screen, every phone carried Tara's voice. She laid out the evidence calmly, piece by piece. The falsified exports, the forged documents, the fake charity partners. And then, halfway through, she said my name. Sources close to the investigation include Naomi Crawford, owner of a small catering business who unknowingly became the front used in the scheme. My heart stopped. Within an hour, people were calling, texting, knocking on my door. The market women stared as I walked past. Some whispered, some offered hugs. Others asked the question that burned through all the noise. Was your husband part of it? By evening, police cars were outside our gate. They took statements, collected devices, asked about Madame Eloise. Gotti sat quietly beside me, answering everything with slow honesty. When they left, I went to the kitchen, the only place that still felt like mine. I stirred a pot that didn't need stirring, tasting salt and tears together. Gotti came in behind me. I'm sorry, he said. For all of it. Turned. Sorry isn't enough, Gotti. But maybe truth will be. He nodded, and for the first time in months, there was no defense in his eyes. Only surrender. The next morning, the newspapers screamed headlines. Eloise Foods denies allegations. CEO promises internal audit. Whistleblower missing. My stomach twisted at that last line. Tara hadn't answered any calls since the broadcast. Her team said she'd gone underground for safety. But something told me she was in danger. Then, at noon, I received a message from an unknown number. Meet me where we first spoke. Come alone. It was signed E. My pulse raced. Madame Eloise was calling me back. The cafe where we'd first met looked the same. Sunlight spilling through dusty blinds, the smell of old coffee in the air. Madame Eloise sat by the window in a simple blue shawl, calm as though the world wasn't burning outside. You came, she said. You left me with no choice. I slid into the chair opposite her. Tara's gone. What did you do to her? Her eyes flashed, but her tone stayed smooth. She's safe. Now. She published half a story, one that makes me a monster. You and I both know the truth is never that simple. You built Amari Holdings, I said. You used people, good people, as tools. She sighed. I built opportunities. People like your husband made them dirty. You think I wanted this chaos? The journalists, the police. I wanted loyalty tested. Yours most of all. My loyalty. I nearly laughed. You spied on me, lied to me, and you're still talking about loyalty. She leaned forward. Because you passed the test. You exposed corruption without taking bribes, without running away. That's why I'm giving you a choice. He frowned. A choice. She placed an envelope on the table. Inside is a contract. It transfers part of my legitimate company to your name. Your restaurant, fully funded, staff, permits, everything. But you retract your statement to the press. You say you were misled. I stared at the envelope as though it were poison. You think I'd sell the truth for comfort. I think you're tired, she said softly. And you have more to lose than you realize. Gotti could still face prison. I can make that disappear. Her words hit like a slap. So this was never about truth. It was always control. She smiled sadly. Everything in business is control, Naomi. Even kindness. Understood. Then keep your money. I'll keep my soul. Her expression hardened. Be careful. The world doesn't reward purity. I walked out before she could say more. Outside, the afternoon wind carried the scent of smoke from a distant protest. People shouting, demanding arrests, demanding truth. And for the first time I didn't feel afraid. That night I met Felix by the docks. He handed me another flash drive. Tara left this with me, he said. Said you'd know what to do. When I opened it on my laptop, my breath caught. It was proof of Madame Eloise's overseas accounts, recordings of her calls, and her order to silence witnesses. The real war had just begun. The night felt endless. The sea beyond the docks groaned like a restless creature as I stared at Tara's files. Every name, every signature, every recording, it was all there. Proof that Madame Eloise wasn't just a business magnate. She was the puppeteer behind half the network that had ruined lives for decades. Called Felix. We can't just hold this, I said. If we don't move fast, she'll bury everything. He hesitated. Naomi, she's powerful. This could destroy you too. Then let it. But I won't hide anymore. By morning I was at the city courthouse with a flash drive. A young investigator named Layla took it from me, eyes wide with disbelief as she scrolled through the files. You're aware this could be the biggest financial scandal in years? She asked. I'm aware it's the truth, I replied. Hours later, news alerts exploded again. Exclusive. Leaked evidence exposes full extent of Eloise's empire corruption. Tara Adeyemi confirmed safe. Returns with whistleblower Naomi Crawford. Tara appeared on a live feed that afternoon. Her voice steady despite the shadows under her eyes. This story is about courage, she said. About a woman who refused to trade her integrity for peace. I didn't realize she meant me until she looked straight into the camera. Gotti watched from the living room, silent. Then he whispered, You saved us. I turned to him. No, Gotti. Truth saved us. But we have to live with it now. Outside, protesters filled the streets near Eloy's Foods headquarters. Justice for the people, painted across banners. The world was watching. And then came the broadcast no one expected. Madame Eloise herself, live on every channel, standing behind a podium wearing white. I built this company from ashes, she began. If mistakes were made, I take responsibility. But remember, power never stands alone. It's shared, traded, and stolen. Her smile was calm. Come. The next second, she lifted a folder and tossed it to the reporters. Inside are the names of every partner who profited beside me. You wanted truth. Now face it. When the cameras zoomed in, one name stood near the top of the list. Gotti Crawford. The world turned upside down. Gotti was taken that night. I followed the officers as they escorted him into the black van, tears streaking down my face. He didn't resist. He just turned once, eyes full of regret. At the station I begged for a word, but they said, "He'll be processed first." The hours crawled by. I sat on the bench, fingers clenched around my wedding ring. When Layla came out, her face said everything. He was involved, Naomi. Not just a pawn. He signed off on 2 of the false accounts. My heart broke in quiet pieces. I'd fought for the truth, only to discover it was hiding inside my own home all along. That night, I returned to the empty house. Every corner held memories. Laughter, arguments, promises whispered in the dark. I sat on the floor and cried until dawn. When the sun rose, I made a choice. I packed a single bag, left the house keys on the counter and walked away. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew what I needed, peace. Tara found me 2 days later in a quiet coastal town. She brought food, hugs, and silence. The kind of silence that doesn't ask questions. You could disappear if you wanted, she said softly. No one would blame you. I shook my head. Running won't heal me. Facing it will. So I wrote a statement. A full, honest account. From the first catering job to the final confrontation. I sent it to every major outlet, attaching one line at the end. Truth isn't revenge. It's redemption in disguise. The next morning, my inbox flooded with messages from women across the country. Business owners, widows, students, all saying the same thing. Thank you for not staying silent. 3 months later, I returned to the city. The scandal had cooled into legend. Newspapers called it the Eloise Empire Fall. Madame Eloise was sentenced, but not before she donated half her assets to a foundation for female entrepreneurs. It was her final move. Part guilt, part legacy. Gotti received 5 years. When I saw him at the sentencing, he smiled faintly. You did what I couldn't, he said. You told the truth. He nodded. We both needed to. Outside the courthouse, Tara stood waiting. What now? She asked. I looked up at the skyline, the same city that had once chewed me up and now whispered of new beginnings. I'm opening a new place, I said. Not just a restaurant. A space for stories. Women's voices, second chances. We named it Grace Table. On opening day, the first dish I served was my mother's recipe. Jollof rice with a twist of coconut and ginger. People came, tasted, smiled. For the first time in years I felt light. Later that night, after the guests left, I sat alone under the hanging lanterns and whispered, "Thank you, God." In the distance, thunder rolled, soft and slow, like applause from heaven. The truth had cost me everything. But it also gave me something greater, myself. 6 months passed before I saw Gotti again. The air inside the correctional center smelled of iron and disinfectant. Guards checked my bag twice before letting me through. He was thinner now, the lines on his face deeper. His eyes quieter. When he saw me, he stood but didn't speak. I smiled first. You look stronger. He sat down slowly. You look free. We didn't speak of the trial. We didn't need to. The silence between us was heavy but clean, like the hush after a long storm. I've been reading, he said after a while. Books about truth, grace, and second chances. Funny how you always talked about those things. And I never listened. I leaned forward, hands folded on the table. It's never too late to listen, Gotti. You just have to decide what kind of man you want to be after this. He sighed. I thought I was helping the company. I thought I could fix it before anyone found out. I know, I said gently. But lies don't stay buried. They grow roots. He looked down, shame shadowing his face. Do you still hate me? No, I whispered. Hate is heavy. I've carried enough. He blinked fast, then smiled through tears. You were always stronger than me. I reached across the table and took his hand, even as the guards watched. Strength isn't loud, I said. Sometimes it's just the choice to stay kind when you have every reason not to. When I left, he waved, a small, almost childlike wave. For the first time, I believed he truly wanted to change. That night, I went home and prayed for him. Not as a wife to a husband, but as one soul to another. Both broken, both learning to heal. Weeks later, a letter arrived at Grace's table. The handwriting was elegant and old-fashioned. It read, My dear Naomi, if you're reading this, I am gone. But know this, you were the test I never expected to fail. I wanted to measure loyalty, but I found truth instead. You showed me that wealth without integrity is just noise. I have left something behind for you, not money but what it can become. In my will, you'll find a grant under your name. Use it for others. Feed not their mouths alone but their courage. With what remains of my flawed heart. Madame Eloise. Tears slipped down my cheeks. I folded the letter carefully and placed it beside the framed photo of my first restaurant day. Me in my apron, smiling nervously at the camera. Later I met Tara at the pier. The sea glimmered gold as the sun dropped low. She really changed in the end, Tara said quietly. Maybe she always wanted to, I replied. Some people just don't know how until it's too late. We watched the waves roll in silence. Then I said, the grant. It'll fund training for women who want to start small food businesses. It's time I passed the grace forward. Tara smiled. You never stop, do you? I stop often, I said. But grace keeps pushing me forward. A year later, Grace's table became more than a restaurant. It became a home for stories. Every month we hosted Truth Nights, where people came to share the moments that changed their lives. Students, single mothers, ex-convicts, retired teachers, all spoke and cried and healed together over bowls of hot soup. One evening, as the lights dimmed and music played softly, a young woman stood up. I used to think being kind was weakness, she said. Then I read Naomi Crawford's story. Everyone turned toward me. I smiled shyly, heart swelling. When the event ended, I walked outside. The night breeze smelled of roasted peppers and rain. Across the street, I could see the city lights reflected on the wet pavement, bright, trembling, alive. I took a deep breath and whispered, Thank you, Gotti. Thank you, Madame Eloise. Thank you for the lessons wrapped in pain. In that moment, I realized the truth wasn't just what had been revealed. It was who I had become because of it. I wasn't the woman waiting for her husband to come home anymore. I was the woman who built something out of heartbreak, a table where others could find hope again. And as I locked the restaurant door, the last light flickered across the sign that read, Grace Table, where kindness never wastes. The night swallowed the glow, but the warmth stayed. In me, in the world, in every hand I'd held along the way. This is end of my story. Thanks for watching.